The street thought she was cursed. At 14, thrown into the dirt, pregnant and abandoned, Adebimpe was given away to a man who looked like a beggar. But behind the rags and silence, a secret waited, one that would drag her from disgrace into a world she never imagined. What happens when the girl no one wanted becomes the woman no one can ignore? When mercy collides with vengeance, and the same hands that once dragged her through the dust are forced to beg for sight? Her journey begins with betrayal, but it doesn't end there. Because in the ashes of cruelty, she forges a crown. The only question is, when power and pain meet, who truly walks away free? Welcome to the Judge Stories, where every tale is raw, gripping, and unforgettable. Please subscribe to help us grow, and drop a comment telling us which country you're watching from. Your voice keeps these stories alive. The street was already awake with gossip before the sun had a chance to rise. Adebimpe stood barefoot on the cracked concrete, her wrapper slipping from one shoulder, her belly swollen with shame. At 14, she was 8 months pregnant. Her stepmother, Iwayaronke, gripped her wrist like she was dragging out the trash. "Take her!" she screamed, flinging a frayed nylon bag into the dirt. "She's cursed like her late mother. Go and beg for food with that bastard in your belly." A small crowd had gathered, neighbors in wrappers, men in faded singlets, children peeking from behind their mothers. No one said a word. They just watched. Adebimpe trembled. "Please, Ma, please." But Iyaronka's slap silenced her, the same slap she had known since childhood, the one that came before hunger, before insults, before loneliness. A man stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, dark-skinned, dreadlocked, with a faded polo shirt and rubber slippers. He looked like he had slept on benches. His eyes didn't wander. They held still on Adebimpe. "That's him," Iwayaronke sneered. "Your new husband, a beggar like you. Now leave my compound and don't ever return." Adebimpe looked up, dazed. This stranger, her husband? Her knees gave out, but she caught herself. Her eyes locked into his. Something flickered behind them. Pity? Resignation? She couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," she whispered to herself, more than to him. He said nothing, just turned and began walking. Slowly, Adebimpe followed, each step a farewell. First to her father's house, then to the only childhood she'd ever known. The crowd parted as they passed, like death had walked by. A neighbor spat, a woman hissed. Someone laughed behind her back. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. Just the quiet ache of a girl whose voice had never been heard. As they turned the corner, her hand clutched her belly protectively. She didn't know his name. She didn't know where they were going. But the worst part was, no one had stopped it. Not a soul. And that silence burned louder than Iwayaronke's screams. They walked for what felt like hours, past peeling zinc roofs, past sleepy goats nibbling at trash, past the edge of the world Adebimpe had always known. She said nothing. He said even less. The man's steps were steady, like he knew exactly where they were going. Adebimpe, cradling her belly, struggled to keep up. The early sun turned her skin sticky, and the weight of her unborn child pressed against her spine like punishment. She wanted to ask where they were headed. She wanted to ask his name, but she'd learned not to ask questions no one cared to answer. Finally, they reached a bend in the dirt path that opened into an empty clearing. Wild grass, scattered palm trees, the low hum of crickets. Then she saw it. A black SUV, gleaming, out of place, out of reality. 4 men in black suits stood beside it, motionless. Eyes hidden behind dark glasses. One stepped forward and nodded sharply at the man she'd followed. "Everything is ready, sir." "Sir?" Adebimpe froze. The man she thought was a beggar, barefoot like her, nodded calmly and turned toward her. His voice came low, quiet. "Get in. You're safe now." She blinked, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Safe. The door opened. One of the men reached out gently to guide her. She recoiled instinctively, hugging her belly. What? What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. The man beside her, her supposed husband, finally met her eyes. My name is Tunde. Just trust me. She hesitated, then climbed in. The seats smelled of leather and lavender. The AC kissed her face with coolness she hadn't felt in years. Her palms rested on her lap, still dusty from the village road. Tunde entered beside her. The SUV pulled away, tires crunching the gravel behind them. As the car moved, she dared a glance at him. He wasn't looking at her, just out the window, like he'd done this before. She pressed her hand to her chest. Was this another trick? Another setup? Her voice cracked. Why me? No answer. Only silence. But it didn't burn like Iwayaronke's silence. This one felt different. The SUV sped down the highway. Behind them, the village disappeared into dust. Ahead, something unknown was waiting. The gates swung open like the entrance to a dream. High white walls, trimmed hedges, water fountains dancing in sync with soft jazz, humming from hidden speakers. Adebimpe had never seen anything like it. She stepped out slowly, feet unsure on polished marble. Her wrapper, dusty and loose, felt like a sin against the shining tiles. The mansion rose before her, glass and concrete, glowing gold under the setting sun. If shame had a place, it did not live here. Tunde opened the door without a word. Inside was cooler than any place she'd ever known. Cold air brushed her skin. The living room stretched like a palace. White curtains, low leather sofas, paintings of faceless women hung on the walls. It smelled like jasmine and money. He gestured toward the seat. Sit. Someone will bring you food. She didn't sit. She stood there, clutching her stomach, blinking like someone dropped into a film. I don't understand, she finally whispered. Who are you? Tunde's voice was calm. I told you, I'm here to help. That's not an answer. He looked at her then, fully. Tunde Adebayo. I run Adebayo Motors. I own this house, that car, that life. Adebimpe's breath caught. She backed a step. But why pretend? Because your stepmother would only give you away to someone she believed was beneath her. Her knees buckled, and this time she sat, her world spun. I heard your story from one of my drivers. He grew up in your village. He told me what she did. I couldn't ignore it. The food came, hot jollof rice and grilled chicken on a golden tray. She stared at it. The aroma tempted her, but her hands shook. Eat, Tunde said softly. You're safe here, Adebimpe. She didn't move. Safe. She had never known the word. Later in the room they gave her. A room with its own bathroom, soft sheets and silence that didn't hurt. She curled up and cried for the first time since her mother died. Not because she was afraid, but because part of her had started to believe she might live. She woke to quiet. Not the silence of punishment, but of peace. A strange softness surrounded her. The sheets, the scent of rose soap, the hum of a distant generator. This wasn't home. It was something gentler. In the weeks that followed, she began to settle. Slowly, doctor visits were arranged. 2 nannies hired. She didn't speak much, but she watched everything, eyes sharp, guarded. Her son, Ayotunde, came into the world crying and healthy, tiny fists, deep brown skin, hair like hers. When he wrapped his fingers around hers, something in her shifted. A flicker of love she didn't know she still had. She bathed him, fed him, slept beside him. She whispered to him stories of her mother, who had once braided her hair in the moonlight. She imagined a future, one where Ayotunde would never feel unwanted. But futures are fragile. It happened at night. She was rocking him gently when he began to cough, then choke. His body stiffened in her arms. Tunde, she screamed. Doors flew open. He rushed in, barefoot, panic wiping his usual calm away. The driver raced them through the dark Lagos streets, honking through red lights. But by the time they arrived, Ayotunde was still, cold, gone. She sat in the hospital hallway, blood on her wrapper, her arms empty. When they returned home, she didn't eat, didn't speak. The crib was left untouched. She locked the door and tried to become hollow. Until one morning, Tunde found her in the bathroom, knife in hand. "Don't," he said, voice trembling. "Please." She collapsed into him. "He was all I had." "You have more," he whispered. "You have breath, you have fight. You're not finished." For weeks he stayed close, bringing books, a small laptop, and soft music. One night he placed a tablet in front of her and said, "This world has tried to erase you. Learn to code. Build something no one can take." At first she thought it was nonsense. But then she clicked, and clicked again, until the pain slowly turned into purpose. Late nights lit her face with screen glow. Fingers tapping keys, eyes focused. Her grief sharpened her like iron and flame. Adebimpe learned fast: HTML, CSS, Python, JavaScript. The world of code became her voice, one no one could silence. She poured her pain into structure, her memories into logic, and through every line she wrote, she built something new. Her first app was simple: househelp, a panic alert tool for girls in danger, with emergency contact buttons and discreet location tracking. Inspired by the night she was dragged into the bush, Tunde watched from a distance, never crowding her. When she showed him the finished prototype, he nodded once. "It'll save lives." It launched. Within 6 months, schools began requesting it. NGOs called. One girl's idea, born from her own nightmares, became a rising star in women's safety tech. Adebimpe gave herself a new name online: BIM Code. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was creating. Soon she moved into a leadership role in Tunde's Tech Foundation. Then she launched her own, the Ayotunde Foundation, named after the child who never got to grow. It funded surgeries, women's shelters, and school scholarships. The media caught on: the girl who rose from ashes. They called her Madam Bimpe, and for the first time she smiled when people called her name. Her past was still there, quiet, like a scar, but it no longer defined her. Then one humid morning, her assistant walked in, hesitant. "Ma, there's someone here to see you." Bimpe glanced up from her laptop. "Who?" The woman swallowed. "Your father." Her chest tightened. "Baba Deji." She hadn't seen him in over a decade, since the day he left for work and never came back. Anger bloomed in her throat like fire. "Let him in." He entered slowly, a weathered man in a faded buba, cap in hand. His eyes met hers and filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to come back. I searched, but I failed you." She didn't speak, not yet. Instead, she stood still, strong, whole. And the girl who had once been discarded was no longer begging to be seen. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. But not like this. Her father sat across from her, hands trembling around a glass of water. "They locked me up, Bimpe," he said, voice cracking. "Wrong identity. No phone, no message got through. I begged them. I wrote letters." She believed him. Not instantly, but the pain in his voice matched the silence of her childhood. Still, nothing could prepare her for what came next. "She's here," he said suddenly. "Who?" He looked down. "Ronki." Her blood turned to ice. "She's blind. Tumor behind her eyes. Can't afford the surgery. Someone dropped her off at General Hospital. I didn't know where else to bring her." Bimpe stood slowly. Her heels echoed on the tiled floor. "Aya Ronki?" she said, disbelief slicing through the words. "You brought her here? She's dying." A storm gathered in her chest. The woman who called her cursed, who dragged her through dust, married her to a man she thought was nothing, watched her nearly die of grief. Now she needed saving. She left the room without a word. That night she walked the long corridors of the mansion, past walls that held her rebirth. In her hands she held the hospital file. In her heart, war. She could leave Ronke to suffer. No one would blame her. But as she stood at the edge of her garden, memories bloomed. The slap that knocked her down. The baby that never cried again. the code that became her voice. She turned, entered her home office, and opened her foundation's portal. She approved the full payment for the eye surgery. Not for Ronke, for herself. To prove that the ashes hadn't made her bitter, but brilliant. Let her see who I've become. The next morning, her staff wheeled Ronke into the hospital theater. The same woman who once screamed, "She's as useless as her late mother," was now blind and broken, dependent on the mercy of the girl she tried to erase. Bimpe didn't visit. Not yet. She waited for the bandages to come off. The bandages came off in silence. Nurses held their breath. The surgeon nodded. Slowly, Ronke opened her eyes. Light flooded in, then shape, then the woman she had once tried to erase. Adebimpe stood at the end of the hospital bed, tall, poised, radiant in a wine-colored aro and buba. A gold pin shaped like a flame fastened her scarf. Her gaze was steady. Ronke blinked again. Her breath caught. "You?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Adebimpe?" "No," Bimpe replied. "It's Madam Adebimpe now." Ronke's face crumpled. She tried to speak, but no words formed. "You remember how you dragged me into the street?" Bimpe asked, stepping forward. "Pregnant, barefoot, thrown away like I was never your husband's daughter." Tears ran down Ronke's cheeks. "I should have let you stay blind," Bimpe continued, her voice soft but unflinching. "But I needed you to see what mercy looks like." Ronke reached out with trembling hands. Bimpe didn't take them. "I didn't come for an apology," she said. "I came to end it." With that, she turned and walked out. Ronke broke. The hallway echoed with her sobs. Days later, Baba Deji entered Bimpe's office, holding his phone like it might shatter. "She's gone," he said. "They found her this morning." Ronke had taken her own life. No note, just silence. One she'd used as a weapon, now returned to her. Bimpe stared out the window for a long time. She didn't feel relief or victory, just grief for what hate had wasted. She walked into her foundation's next meeting, like a storm that had passed, poised but quieter, a little heavier but still burning. That evening, she opened a file on her laptop, a new program for therapy support in rural communities. She titled it Ronke's Echo, because even the cruel leave behind lessons. The fundraiser ballroom glittered under a ceiling of chandeliers. Lagos elites sipped champagne while a live band played soft jazz. But all eyes turned as Madame Adebimpe stepped onto the stage. Clad in a flowing emerald gown, gel wrapped like a queen's crown, she stood beneath the banner. The Ayotunde Foundation's 5 years of saving lives. Her voice rang clear. "I was once a girl who had no voice, no shoes, no choice. But today I stand not as a victim, but as a builder of code, of hope, of futures." The room rose to its feet in applause. Afterward, her father stood beside her, eyes shining with pride, and near the back, dressed in a subtle navy agbada, stood the man who once walked her away from disgrace, Tunde Adebayo. He approached quietly. "You've made the world better, Bimpe." She smiled. "You started it." "I just kept walking." He cleared his throat. "I'd like to walk beside you, for real. Not just from the village." Her lips parted. "And then?" She nodded. Months later, their wedding trended across Nigeria. #Tundaved's Bimpe. Photos of her in champagne lace, of her father beaming, of dignitaries and dancers, of culture and tech finally holding hands. They moved into a new home, raised twin girls and a son. Laughter replaced silence. Healing replaced history. One morning, Bimpe visited a quiet plot in Ikoyi cemetery. Under a flowering mango tree, she laid down white roses at her mother's grave. "Rest well, Mama," she whispered, kneeling. "Your daughter wasn't buried. She bloomed." She stood, sunlight catching the flame-shaped brooch on her chest. Her journey hadn't erased the pain. It had refined it. What began as ashes had crowned her.